What is the single biggest dick move in all of history? The original white elephant gifting from the King of Siam. This person would give this royal gift to people he found irritating and be entertained by the recipient's failing efforts to upkeep such an animal. Why don't they just give it away, you ask? Back in the day, receiving a gift and giving it away was perceived as an insult. Go figure. And giving away a gift from a neighboring kingdom is, well, that much bigger of an insult. So no dice. Economies apparently have failed in order to upkeep a royal gift like this. Honestly, dick move King of Siam. For those who don't know, a white elephant is rare and sacred. They were never used for work or war and were just comfortably maintained for their lifetimes at huge expense. So the story goes that there's this people in southern Iraq whose agriculture, economy and way of living were built around them living within the swamps. They were not very fond of Saddam Hussein and his regime and did a protest march towards Baghdad. So meanwhile they moved towards the capital. Saddam took some excavators and drained the whole swamp. Problem solved. This is why I am always kind of wary when I see dictators, autocrats and the likes depicted in the media as dumb or whatnot, because you simply just don't rise to those levels of absolute power without being a sneaky backstabbing bastard. Are they pose garbage? Yes, but they are also way smarter than it looks from the outside and they know exactly what they are doing and we should not underestimate them in any way. Edit wow. So this is how it feels when people actually read your comments and you get to have their intelligent opinion. Thanks you to everyone who responded and I tried to address every point. I just want to add that I am in no way an expert in this, so it's just my opinion which could be uninformed. I guess what I was trying to say is I am legit worried about some states, especially the CCP, and now I am officially on one of their lists for Mayo, and it bugs me when I see them taken lightly or when literally nobody from the international community react when they pull some outrageous Thomas Midgley invented Freon and putting lead into gasoline. He knew that putting lead into gasoline was a dick move and he did it anyway for money. He knew because he got lead poisoning himself and still lied about its effects on people. Environmental historians have said that he has had the single largest impact on the Earth's atmosphere of any single organism in the history of the planet. Not to mention that lead levels directly correspond to lower cognitive abilities in the general population, and you can look up the dates to know who would have been affected. This also has to be a story of poetic justice. He had also inverted a system of levers and pullers to help him move around in bed after he became bedridden and his own invention strangled him in his sleep. The world. Oh no. Anyway, this. Apparently the crime wave of the 70s-80s corresponds exactly to environmental lead. People exposed as children had greater odds of learning and behavioral problems that made them less likely to hold steady jobs and more likely to resort to crimes. Amazing detective story. It started with the scientist who discovered radioactive dating, but found that all his samples were somehow contaminated with lead. I always thought the Fed putting Andrew Jackson on the $20 felt like a big FU since he hated the idea of a centralized bank. Putting your fishing boats to the coast of other countries because you already fished everything in your country's surrounding sea. When the Mexican government rounded up thousands of Yaqui natives, made them walk over 300 kilometers to the coast, put them on boats, and sold them as slaves for about 25 cents. Most ended up on plantations in Veracruz where they were worked to death. Slavery was already illegal in Mexico at the time. When was this? Early 1900s. Before 1965, Indonesian government sent academicians, especially STEM graduates, to study in Eastern Europe. After the supposed communist uprising in the 30th of September 1965, the government revoked their citizenship and declared them stateless. They risked persecution and possible torture and murder if they insist on returning. These nuclear physicist, master engineer, and PhD graduates take menial jobs, becoming janitors and wait tables to carry on living with virtually no possibility of return to their country. Why couldn't they get jobs in those fields in another country? Sometimes degrees don't translate well to other countries, aren't accepted or good enough to meet standards. There's a lot of refugees who have higher degrees before war hit their region. They had to relocate elsewhere where they couldn't find a job in their field because of that reason. That lady who stole the unborn baby out, the other lady, the psycho bee that pretended to sell baby clothes to lure a pregnant lady in and then cut her baby out and leave her to go to the hospital, all just to cover up the ongoing lie to her family that she was pregnant and just suddenly had a miscarriage. Yeah, I live a couple streets from where that went down. Craziest sh I've ever had the misfortune of reading into. Dynal Lane. Right. Unfortunately this isn't a one-off. The latest one is a long-time friend pulling this sh and both the pregnant woman and the baby died. This seems to be a particular syndrome. In depravity. Brutus pretending to be Caesar's best friend and then literally stabbing him in the back. Around the formation of the Persian Empire, Herodotus tells the story how King Astyages, the last king of Media, had a dream that his daughter would give birth to a king who would overthrow him, so he orders his general Harpagus to kill the child at birth. Harpagus doesn't want to kill the baby spill royal blood, so he gives the child, Cyrus, to a shepherd to raise. 10 years later Cyrus is discovered alive. King Astyages fakes being happy that the kid is alive, suggesting he always regretted issuing that order. To celebrate he plans a feast and tells Harpagus to send his son over to play with Cyrus. During the banquet, King Astyages has the son of Harpagus killed, cooked, and fed to Harpagus. When the act was revealed, it is said that Harpagus did not react other than to gather the pieces of his son and remove them for burial. Harpagus bides his time. Much later, Cyrus is gathering forces against King Astyages. Astyages orders Harpagus, as his primary general, to lead the army against Cyrus. After a 3-day battle, Harpagus took his revenge for the death of his son by turning on the battlefield in favor of Cyrus, resulting in Astyages' defeat and the formation of the Persian Empire. Wow, I feel like you wouldn't want to leave someone as your general whose son you fed to them. What are the chances that the story was written after the king's death to give the general justification for betraying his king? France asking Haiti for a compensation after Haiti overthrew the colonial administration. It took 143 years for Haiti to pay off that debt. Why would Haiti not just tell them to F off? Because France could have wiped them out. Money or the gun. Haiti, we declare independence. France, cancellation fees apply to independence after 1800. Haiti, when did this become policy? France, this became policy after 1783. Haiti, glares at 13 colonies. 13 colonies. Got any slaves to sell? Holy crap. I knew Haiti was the only successful slave rebellion in the world, but I didn't know France did that. Haiti is now one of the poorest countries in the world. They paid around 21 billion in today's dollars as payment for the plantations that the slaves built and for compensation for the value of the slaves. France also demanded discounts on any goods that they sold. Today, France completely rejects the idea of giving any of that back. Well, not really relevant, but when 50 Cent bought the first 4 rows of a Ja Rule concert, and Ja had to perform in front of 4 empty rows, lol. Or when 50 Cent bet Floyd Mayweather to read a page of a Harry Potter book and exposed Floyd's illiteracy to everyone, lol. Floyd's response was hilarious though. Bet 50 a large sum if 50 could give him a recent photo of 50 hugging Marquise. Those moth affairs evolving to suck mammal blood, and now we got to worry about mosquitoes, leeches, ticks, etc. If you didn't want parasites eating your blood, why did you keep all your nutrients in it? Silly mammals. Just inject your blood flow with rat poison. That'll show those dumb mosquitoes. Russia telling Ukraine to give up their nukes for peaceful independence, only for Russia to take back Crimea a couple decades later. Yup, now when any rogue state wants nuclear weapons I understand completely. Ray Kroc stealing McDonald's out from under the brothers and not even paying them royalties. Dude, I watched The Founder on Netflix and it's straight up cruel how he just took everything from the brothers, divorced his wife and took another guy's wife, and then proceeded to be an a-hole while expanding the business and getting filthy rich. It was shocking how little he seemed to care about the consequences of his actions so long as he was making money. Read the real story. There are important differences between the movie and reality. They wanted to paint Kroc in a bad light, not saying he was a saint, just saying the real value of McDonald's was the scale, and the brothers tried to franchise, failed and couldn't scale the business. There was no handshake agreement as shown in the movie. That was a total fabrication. Opium wars were pretty dickish. You don't wanna buy hard drugs from us and turn your population into useless addicts? Fine. We'll invade you and bombard your cities until you start buying. As this legend said, the British were furious that the Chinese could tell the British what to do in China. I would probably say that this was one of the key events that led to much of Chinese foreign policy thinking even till now. In order to prevent another century of humiliation, It's led to foreign policy focused on ensuring security and removing threats in any way. That woman scorned who killed defying everybody. Hang about, I'll google it. Saint Olga of Kiev, after her husband, the prince, was tortured and murdered by dissidents, Drevlian. She got vengeance by buried alive the first messengers, burnt boiled alive the second set of messengers, had a funeral feast for her late husband which included Drevlians, and then had 5,000 of them killed. After a year-long siege, Olga said, "Give me 3 pigeons and 3 sparrows from each house." The Drevlians rejoiced at the prospect of the siege ending for so small a price, and did as she asked. Olga then instructed her army to attach a piece of sulfur bound with small pieces of cloth to each bird. At nightfall, Olga told her soldiers to set the pieces aflame and release the birds. They returned to their nests within the city, which subsequently set the city ablaze. There was not a house that was not consumed, and it was impossible to extinguish the flames, because all the houses caught fire at once. As the people fled the burning city, Olga ordered her soldiers to catch them, killing some of them and giving the others as slaves to her followers. She left the remnant to pay tribute. Horribly cruel, but that bird move is actually genius. Always enjoy a creative way to end a siege. You forgot the reason she did this. A neighboring king killed her husband and ordered her to marry him and give her kingdom over. She didn't take it kindly, and even better, all those people she killed at the feast, they were all young noblemen. She told them she was going to give up and agreed to marry as long as she got to pick him. So the enemy country sent a bunch of their young, rich, noblemen and she killed them all. That's kind of a huge deal because she basically just wiped out a generation of upcoming men in an extremely patriarchal government. The burning of the Library of Alexandria. Your pet leaving your room after you carried them in. Your pet moving away from you after you sit close to them. My dog doesn't like me. I don't know why. I'm nice to him. I give him food. I call him a good boy. But in the 5 years that he's been in my family, he's come in my room of his own volition like 6 times. One of which was to take a shit on my carpet. Probably when they relocated Rasputin's schlong from his body to that jar. I thought that was sorted and it was just a pickled sea cucumber with a good backstory. I think the only way to know for sure is a taste test. Russian army pushing Hitler back across Europe. Get to the outskirts of Warsaw and broadcast in Polish to have all the men in the city join the fight. Cue large uprising. Russia holds back until all the men in the city are killed, so there's nobody left to resist when they occupy, and then resume pushing Hitler back across Europe. Making the woman who had her labia melted together due to McDonald's not wanting give people refills look like a thieving bee because she was in the right and only wanted her medical bills paid. The Japanese believed it would have been dishonorable to surprise attack an unexpecting enemy, so they sent a declaration of war to the US 30 minutes before the Pearl Harbor attack. However, the upper military brass delayed that message until 20 minutes after the attack had begun. Dick moved to both sides of the conflict there. Trojan horse. That was a big dick move, but I think OP is asking about big dick moves. When a British officer was talking to Robert Surcouf, he said, "We British fight for honor, you French fight only for gain." To which Surcouf replied saying, "You are quite right, each fights for that which he does not possess." ISIS and or whatever Muslim or Asian group in power, going through ancient temples and destroying millennia-old statues and works of art simply because they represent a different philosophy. The thought of destroying some 2,000-year-old statue just because I don't believe in their philosophy is beyond criminal to me. It is a crime against all of humanity. I mean, who the F are you to think you are so important you can destroy something so valuable? Mao Zedong's Cultural Revolution. Basically Mao's return to power after the failure of the Great Leap Forward and an opportunity to purge political rivals. The Cultural Revolution is estimated to have killed another 20 million, on top of the 30 million from the famine that followed the Great Leap Forward. Hitler killing Hitler and thus not giving everyone else the satisfaction of doing so, probably doesn't qualify as biggest dick move per se, but certainly a dick move. After the successful invasion of France in WWII, Hitler forced the French to sign the surrender document with Germany in the exact same railway car that Imperial German representatives had signed the armistice of WWI, in the exact same spot, by then a museum piece. The train car was specifically moved back to that spot for this purpose. Near the end of WWII, the SS destroyed the railway car, presumably to prevent the Allies from making Germany sign yet another surrender document in it. Apparently, Stalin wanted to capture Hitler alive so he could parade him through Red Square in chains. That would have made for some awesome historical photography. When Georgy Zhukov was made Marshal of the Soviet Union in 1943, he announced that he would bring back Hitler in a cage. He allegedly, there's no direct source for it, but it appears in multiple second-hand testimonies, told family members of war dead you will have your chance to spit on him, piss on him in one telling, and wanted to display the caged Hitler in every town and village German troops had touched during their invasion of the USSR. One colleague said he'd proposed burying Hitler in the latrine at a military school so the Germans would know Soviet soldiers were shitting on him for eternity. That time a fish evolved legs and crawled out of the ocean. Things just went downhill from there, and so the problem remained. Lots of the people were mean, and most of them were miserable, even the ones with digital watches. Many were increasingly of the opinion that they'd all made a big mistake in coming down from the trees in the first place, and some suggested that even the trees had been a bad move, and that no one should ever have left the oceans. Douglas Adams, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Speaking of dick moves, in the beginning the universe was created. This has made a lot of people very angry and been widely regarded as a bad move. Douglas Adams, The Restaurant at the End of the Universe. Having an overseas girlfriend. Haven't been able to meet for 8 months. Being desperate to be reunited during Corona only to find out to see her getting engaged with another dude. When God told Abraham to sacrifice his son Isaac, and right when Isaac was begging for his life and his dad was about to drive a knife into his chest, God said, "Psych. I got you good, bro. Kill that ram over there instead." This always bothered me when I was learning about religion. I have a hard time totally respecting someone who asks a man to kill his own son.